live streaming. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome everyone to the first operations and policy meeting of the school year, and lovely day out there, nice fall day out there. We had some rain on the weekend, so really happy to see all of that out there. So I'd like to acknowledge and recognize the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. For those of you who are just joining us, we have 4 trustees who are on this committee, voting members: Trustee Hansa, Trustee Rob Painter, Trustee Nicole Duncan, and myself. Other trustees are here in capacity of putting forward motions and or participating in the conversation, but would not be able to vote on the motions at this point in time. We would save that for the board meeting at the end of the month. So thank you very much and welcome. Could I have approval of the agenda this evening? Trustee Duncan, thank you very much. Can we have a vote? All those in favor of the agenda as approved? Thank you very much. That's passed. Approval of the minutes of June 14th. Could I have approval of the minutes, please? Trustee Hensa, thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none, can I have approval of the minutes? All those in favor? Thank you very much, and that's passed. No business arising. We have no presentations to the committee tonight, so I will turn to Interim Superintendent Whitten for recognition of our student representative this evening.
Great, thank you, Trustee Leonard. We met as a whole group last week. We have another fantastic group of students coming from all of our high schools. This evening we have Kelvin Lee from Reynolds. Kelvin's joining us, and he's aware this is a committee meeting, and his voice as items come up is very valued. This is the first meeting with our student reps at our ad hoc committee, so welcome, Kelvin.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Kelvin. Superintendent, do you have any? You have nothing under personnel. So we're going right to finance and legal affairs. Secretary Treasurer Morris.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. I'll take you to the financial report for August 2021. This is our first report of the year for July and August. I'll start off with the revenue. We are sitting with 83% of our revenue ready to available to collect. I just wanted to sort of explain as we move into second year of COVID, perhaps better in terms of rentals and things like that, revenue generation than last year's COVID. We've collected 17% of our revenue by the end of August compared to 9 or 10% last year. So that's a good news story for us. And you'll hear me repeat this over the months that I deliver this report. A 12-month budget should have about 83% remaining in it to be collected, and 10-month budgets should have about 100%. So the fact that we are already only waiting to collect 83% of our revenue is a good news story for us. Similarly, on the expenditure side, we are sitting at the same point we were last year with 95% remaining in the budget. So between the 10 and 12-month budgets, we are sitting in good stead. I did want to point out one thing. I guess on page 13 of the pack-up, or the 13th page of the pack-up, there's a red description under 439 called Digital Services Recovery. And you will notice that this is in red because it's new. Last year we had, this is the NGN network, so our provincial obligation to the Ministry of Education for our internet in all of our schools. And so last year we had this rolled up in cell phones, and people were continually asking, why do we spend so much money on cell phones? And so we thought it would be important to break that out this year to delineate the actual cell phone costs as much less than the roll-up budget we were using last year. So thank you to Katrina and her team for just making that budget a little more clear for us.
Right, thank you. Any questions on any of those reports? Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through the Chair to the Secretary Treasurer. Thank you very much to you and the team for the report. I appreciate very much that line item has been severed from cell phones. I was one of the ones that was asking why the budget was so high for cell phones, thinking we might be able to claw some money back to allocate towards the deficit. But so I appreciate that is now separated out, so it's clear that is our contribution for our network services. On the page before, so there's a couple of other items of red. I just wondered if you could walk us through line items. So this is on page 12 of the pack-up. It's 199 recoveries, and it's in red. I just wondered if you could explain what that is.
Sure. So recoveries is where we may have a rental where we're charging out custodial hours. And so the regular custodial hours go to the wages and benefits. And meanwhile, the rental revenue to recover those wages and benefits goes into something called recoveries. And then from time to time, we clear that out to zero and just move the expenditures from wages and benefits down into recoveries or vice versa. So it's really a timing issue between the time we charge the labor to our budget and the time we charge the recovery of that labor through our rental process.
And Trustee Duncan?
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that. I wondered if I know that as I was looking through the line item budget that's been provided in the pack-up, there was one more area around transportation and photocopying. I noticed that our photocopying, as compared to the allocation from the previous year, and some of the administrative supplies has been reduced significantly. Miscellaneous services also reduced this year quite significantly. But there was a line item around transportation that had increased. And I wondered whether you could give us a little bit of some context there on, I want to say it was potentially busing costs that have increased, but the actual number of routes has decreased. I wondered if you could give us a little bit of context around that.
I'm sorry, do you know which line item you're looking at?
Let me just find it. Sorry, it's a little bit awkward going back and forth between the Zoom.
Yeah, I know.
And
Trying to be digital here. Yeah.
Yeah. Contracted transportation. So it's at 331.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And so I just noticed the increase there, and I believe it's in a later report in the pack-up. We actually have reduced the number of routes, but the costs are going up. And I just wondered if you could provide some context around why that is.
Yeah, so this is contracted transportation, not necessarily our labor. I would, unless Katrina knows the answer to this, we would have to bring the answer to that back to the meeting, Trustee Duncan. I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask my one last question, Chair, before we move on? Sorry, I don't want to monopolize though. Someone else's question. Okay. The only other thing that jumped out at me on this report was around software maintenance. And again, just looking for some context, we're seeing, and let me give you the line item so it's easier. That's at 323. Mm-hmm. And again, we're just noticing an increase from last year. It was 961,000 and change, and now we're at 1.3 million and change. And I'm just wondering, again, if we could get some context on what the increased costs are related to.
Okay, we can bring that one back as well.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from anyone on those reports? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for those ones. And then we're going to E2 budget change report.
Right, so this is our first budget change report. We were bringing these last fall and into the amended budget just so that the board and the public can know, some of the changes that occur throughout the year as we move from preliminary to amended. I'll start at the top of the page in terms of our preliminary, or about a quarter of the way down. Our preliminary budget of $213,000 was carried on June 3rd, as we know. Within that 213 million, the board had allocated 4.8 million to balance the budget and had left $821,000 in its reserve. We've now come to our year end and are proposing some further surplus appropriation, and no decisions have been made about this appropriation. This is going to the board for approval on September 27th after our audit committee meeting on Wednesday. And so these are the usual categories. I'll just point out a couple. Net school funded balances and the link school funded balance are typical in a year. In fact, they've gone down, but I'll report out more on that next time. International Student Program has requested a carry forward to bring themselves up to pre-COVID sort of services. Purchase order commitments and department carry forwards are fairly typical. What I did want to point out is we are going to introduce year 1 of 5 of the network infrastructure that did not go through the budget process, and year 2 of 2 of the shop upgrades of $350,000. We're also asking for an additional reserve of $921,000 and a reserve for international of $425,000 that we also held last year. So in addition to the 213 million approved on June 3rd, our surplus appropriation totals 7.5. And that would add to our budget, as well as some of the changes we've realized throughout July, August, and into September. You'll see that the early learning framework, we have received a small grant and have similarly assigned it to an expense account on the expense side. Our after school sports and arts initiative targeted funding carry forward is also a revenue and an expense that is new. We have had a donation to Cooper Smith, so incoming revenue and offsetting expense on the other side. Our Indigenous grad and scholarship donation, as well as we adjust the cafeteria revenue budget after the preliminary budget is approved. These revenues flow into the district and flow out to the schools, so they're in and out. And so we just budget the 55,000 for a budget to show something for cafeteria revenue. So if the appropriation is approved on September 27th, our total budget as of September 20th would be 221 million almost. And just down below, wanted to point out the reserves that were approved June 3rd, again, the 821, the additional that we're requesting of 921, and the international reserve of 425 would leave us with $2.1 million in reserve, and that is less than 1% of our revenue. And the other reserves we hold are local capital and Ministry of Education restricted. Of course, we can't use these monies for operating, but they are capital reserves that the district can use with board and ministry approval. New this year, we want to report out on any changes in our special purpose grants, and there shouldn't be too many because these are fairly fixed funds, although we've had some new funding come in from the ministry this year around mental health. We've assigned some COVID recovery plan ministry provincial funding to mental health, as well as an actual targeted fund early actions initiative. And we are coming up with a spending plan around that mental health pool of funds and can report out on that once that decision is made. And then, of course, the ministry's given us some restart funding for COVID, $456,000 in our district. And so we increased custodial hours by 10 positions, which was a great addition because obviously we had a lot of hours last year and didn't have the same amount of funding this year. So we were happy to be able to add some positions. And then directional floor stickers. So these all got picked up before school started, and now people are requesting them again. So we've ordered some for the district, and then we're holding 30,000 in reserve or in contingency for any startup pressures should we need to do any deep cleaning in any of our schools. And that's the budget change report.
Okay, any questions for Secretary Treasurer? Trustee Painter.
Uh,
Did we lose Rob?
Yes, I cannot see him anymore.
Trustee Painter. Well, we'll come back to his question. Should he dial back in, maybe Andy can watch for him or whomever is monitoring that. But we'll watch for Trustee Painter and we will let him ask his question when he gets there. We'll go on to E3 if there's no other questions right now, and then we'll come back to this.
Chair, pardon me,
Yes.
sorry, it's Trustee Duncan. I do have one question if
Oh,
I
I'm
may.
sorry, go ahead.
No problem. I'm sure I'm just not in your view at the moment. Yeah, I just had a question around enrollment. I wonder to the chair, to the secretary treasurer, whether you could give us an initial update on where we are enrollment wise, if we're within the enrollment numbers that we anticipated or whether we're exceeding those or how it's looking.
We don't have any firm numbers yet. Collections are happening as we speak. And so we know the 1701 is due after the snapshot date of September 30th. I think I can say for elementary and middle that we have increased over June projections and I cannot comment on secondary. I have not seen those numbers yet.
Thanks.
Great.
Glad to hear
Thank
that.
you. And still no Trustee Painter. Okay, we'll move on to budget process E3, Secretary Treasurer.
Sure, and I think Chair Leonard, you will want to chime in here too probably, but I wanted to let the public know that the board has had a trustee working session on September 16th. We had it was a really good conversation. The agenda items fell under the topics of context, value setting, Indigenous voice, budget committee or working group, what would we prefer? Consultation, communication, and finally process and timeline. We had rich conversation over 3 hours. And thank you to trustees and staff for attending. Our next steps are, we believe we need one more meeting in order to sort of solidify a package. And we can possibly approve that at September 27th, depending on when our next meeting is. And we really wanted to get across to the system or the organization that we took a lot of our lead from the spring 2021 experience, as well as the special advisor report. So really trying to build a robust budget process for 22-23 and starting earlier.
Oh, thank you. Before we comment further, Trustee Painter, we'll come back to you in a second. We'll just finish this and then go back to your question now that we've seen you join us.
Thank you.
So I'll just jump in that it was lots of information shared by the financial team for our meeting that we had on last Thursday. I think my only caveat for how well the meeting went was because a third of the trustees did not come to the meeting. Trustees McNally, Rob Painter, and Trustee Duncan. The board didn't feel it could move forward with any recommendations at our meeting tonight or our meeting on the 27th. So that's why we will have to have another further meeting in order to have buy-in from all board members. So we just felt it was important to say that we were hoping to have some clear direction at tonight's meeting before we could move forward, but that wasn't possible. So we look forward to our next meeting. So Trustee Painter, did you want to ask your question for the budget change report?
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, from the looks of things, I'm off mute for a change. Thank you. To the Secretary Treasurer, through the Chair. My question was about the restart, the allocation of funding in the restart program mentioned on page 16. The custodial increase of 10 positions, I was wondering about the discussion there, and I appreciate we have a facilities conversation coming up shortly, so it might be more appropriate there. What I heard from the minister in one of her presentations was that the focus this year was on ventilation. And although the minister herself did not use the word aerosol. That's one that we have heard quite extensively through other sources. So I was curious why the focus was on custodial in this case rather than some of the other approaches to improving safety for our students and staff. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, I think
That's
we
okay.
know our, I think our custodial increase last year was well over, between wages and benefits was, I think, almost $1.7 million or something like that. So, and we knew we were cleaning throughout the day and we were doing intensive cleaning at night. So we also know that we can do the greatest cleaning when the building is empty. And so it was felt that to get the proper cleaning done at least one time a day, as per PHO and ministry protocols, that we made the decision to add custodial. And I think Chuck's going to speak to ventilation in his report.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Hensa, do I see your hand up there? Oh, you've got a little hand there, so sorry. Any other questions about the change report or about the Secretary Treasurer's update in our budget process? Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. We'll be moving to facilities F1. And is that Mr. Morris or Secretary Treasurer? Mr. Morris?
Thank you. So in front of you is my small portion of the backup, my 3-page update for our facilities operation. There's a lot of good information in there. It's difficult to highlight any one of them because of the plethora of work that everybody was involved in throughout the summer and getting ready for the school opening. The one that I will highlight is a new computer maintenance management system. So we're moving from Amoresco into something called eBase, and it offers just a tremendous amount of more flexibility and refinement than Amoresco does. So Justin's been working hard on that to try to get a couple of modules up and running as quickly as he can. And we're looking for, possible tie-in to Retrieve system and wherever else we can blend things together. So we're all a little bit more closely working off on the same type of platform. Playgrounds, we have dedicated 2 people to do inspections on playgrounds. And if we need to, we will have a couple of carpenters shifted over from facilities to do repairs. It's difficult to manage all of our risk management in a timely fashion. So we have to dedicate time to do it. And one of my jobs is to identify and mitigating risk within the district. Minor capital, lots going on there. We've, I forget the number now, Marty told me last week, we've added quite a number of more spaces and childcare spaces since January to the end of October, I believe I asked her. So we're doing really well in that sense. Overall, since we started, we've added a lot, and I'm remiss. I'll dig that out and I can have that at our next update. Major capital, there's just a brief description in there. Operations, Mark Baggett is looking after rentals as well. And his crew have been tremendously busy and trying to keep things clean, disinfected, and ready for the following day. Transportation, Eric's got everything up and running. We've dropped some runs on the small buses, but they're thinking that we may need to add 1 to 2 more runs back into it. They're just doing some logistics right now because there's a lot of children that use those buses that are not attending school right now. And then occupational health and safety is going strong. Our climate and energy, there's some pretty good little pieces of information there for you where Brian is pretty amazing at what he's ferreting out and identifying as cost savings for this district. And And we had a meeting with BC Hydro not too long ago where, and I don't think that's in there, where we talked about hydros, sorry, a couple of years back, I was involved with Hydro talking about batteries. And we were looking at like the Tesla batteries to bank them together and use them to offset our demand charges, which some of our demand charges are quite large. But the cost of that and availability, we kind of shortchanged us. And so we had to kind of park it for now. Hydro came through and says they are going to purchase batteries and they will make batteries available for our school districts. So yay, we won something there. I'm talking to Aaron from Hydro quite a bit lately and just trying to nail down exactly when they think they'll be in a position to begin offering that for us. That'll help us tremendously. Part of this report, I'll talk about UVGI, ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. So before we initiate anything in this district, whether it's something like this or some other new method of doing things, I'll pick someone, and in this case, I had Justin and myself were working together on research. There's a lot of vendors out there saying this does the job. It's number one, it'll kill the virus. It can't kill COVID because that's the disease. But there's a lot of people saying it does kill the virus. Well, research hasn't taken place. There's been a couple of universities that started research on this form of trying to kill the virus, but they use different criteria, and their conclusions caused other higher education to say this is non-conclusive. So the other part of this is UVGI, ultraviolet, can temporarily cause eye damage. It will give you sunburn, and if you're exposed to it for any length of time, there's a theory that it may cause cancer. It has to be mounted 7.5 to 8 feet high from above, just below the ceiling. It must be broadcast strictly horizontal. You must determine if whatever wall covering is on a particular wall, if that will cause it to reflect. Because it does reflect off a lot of different substances. And in this case, if it did reflect, likely it would reflect down. And so we don't want to expose children to any of that. The bit of report that I've got in here on UGVI, it took quite a few hours to research and put it together for you. I think it's fairly informative. And my recommendation is we should not do this, strictly because of the warning of damage to room occupants. We looked at another item and it was called needlepoint ionization. So ions are negatively and positively charged. With this needlepoint, it was the device is quite small and it's got 2 points that rotate. And during that rotation, it interrupts the positivity and the negativity of the ions and causes them to clump together in larger particles. So we thought we had a winner here. And so we're looking at it, and we did a little bit more research again. And we found that 3 universities did proper research on this type of potential remediation of a virus. But their conclusion stated that in changing the negativity and positivity of ions, there's some other offshoot that develops that may be harmful to room occupants. So we were ready to move on this one. So after reading that and do a little bit more research on that one, we shelved it as well. We've got something else that I just discovered today, and over the course of the rest of this week, I'll be doing more research on it, just to see what the results are from proper testing and research on it. So hopefully I can come back at the next meeting with something a little more positive. In the meantime, with ventilation, right now we've got fresh air intake into all of our facilities near 100% open as is possible. About 45% of our facilities have direct digital control, which is DDC, and we can activate that from our office and mechanical shop downstairs. So they can make whatever adjustments they need to on that and resulting heat as well. The other part of the district is all manual. There is no DDC in them yet. It's quite an expense to put in the computerized software. And so we've been picking away at it slowly, trying to tack it on to boiler upgrades or things like that because of the cost. We'll get there, but it's going too slow. So I had a chat today with some of my staff, and then we need to sit down and think about how we can try to expedite this a little bit better, because I'd like to see it done before I retire, and it needs to be sooner than 15 years. So along with the ventilation open 100%, we've got the heat coming back on. We have to adjust the ventilation. We've got some schools that take longer to warm up. So we need to adjust the ventilation a little so the heating units get a chance to at least take the chill off the buildings. And as we progress further into the change in climate, then that, just like we did last year, we'll have more and more heat on and trying to make that balance with the incoming outdoor air. If it gets down to freezing, then there'll be quite a change there. The teachers still have the opportunity to open the windows, and I've let all the principals and VPs know to remind the teachers they can once again do that like they did last year. We run MERV 8 filtration. It's a pleated MERV 10 filtration. And the pleated filters are much better at removing things out of the airflow through the filter. It's not a MERV 13. We can't afford to put MERV 13s in, and there's a tremendous amount of changes we have to make because of that. However, pulling the air out of the classrooms, running them through the system where that air coming in is now greeted with 100% or very close to 100% outside air, that's going to do a lot of watering down of whatever might be in that air. Then it runs through the pleated filters and then it's dispensed back. There's a lot of thought out there that a lot of that aerosol virus would have difficulty making it through. We have yet to determine that positively. But it's with that volume of air coming through, the amount of air we have introduced, and we did last year too, is far in excess of what ASHRAE says that should be going through. But we decided that we'll open them wide up anyways to try to water down everything as much as possible. And then with the outside windows open in the classrooms, a lot of that air will then be expelled out through the window with the fresh air coming in through the intake on the HVAC unit. Any comments, questions on that?
So we've got the, thank you so much, Chuck. I just want to say that this time of the year, we know that we're getting the first update for all the work that your staff has done over the summer. And on behalf of the committee and the board right now, I'd like to say thank you, because I know that the staff take great pride in all the minor, the major, the floors, everything they're doing over the summer to get the schools ready for the first day of school. So thank you so much for a job well done. And I hope you can pass that on to us, because we didn't hear of any hiccups in our school opening to do with the sites or anything like that. So please pass that on. As well, that was a huge comprehensive report on first of all, the UVGI and ventilation updates. So with that in mind, we're sort of discussing two issues here. Do any trustees have any questions for Mr. Morris? Trustee Painter.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate that thorough report. One question about the status of the work at Colquitt's, the bus shelters. I understand there may be, given everything else that's going on, these things happen, but is it impacting access to the field at all? And perhaps you can just give us a sense of what the timeline is on completion of that work. Thank you.
It should not impact the field. What we may do is that may give us an opportunity to pick one of those two fields to upgrade. We're trying to do 1 to 2 of them at least every single year. So that's the positive side of that. I drove by there today and it looked like Hydro were working on the transformer out on the street corner. And that is to upgrade the infrastructure for the electric buses. So they'll be busy with that. But I don't think that we're going to have much impact on the school itself.
Okay, any other further questions? No, seeing none. Oh, Mr. Clark.
Thank you. And I do believe Trustee Duncan has her hand up as well. First time with the meeting. So if I am working on my process, just let me know. I just have a question through the chair to Mr. Morris. I look on page 19 of the pack-up and it's talking about trained all 382 JOSH committee members. Is this in reference to last year or is it in reference to this year? I'm just trying to get a gauge for what year we're referring to for that.
Through the chair, I was going to bring this up because I forgot to add it on to the end of my verbal. So the training is, the ministry did a survey for all school districts, asking questions about what they've got, what they've done, what they're doing, a little bit of history about the HVAC units and when was they last serviced and when is the next one due. So they came out with a template for districts to fill out. So we've got our template. I've created them. I got information off our computerized maintenance system when it comes to the date of last inspection and any changes and what was the type and need of the most recent repair. And also on their recommendations, we've got just what I spoke to with Trustee Painter, the filters, the recommendations, other clean. I speak about needlepoint ionization. I speak about the UVGI research that we did. So the ministry got all of that. And the templates are completed. They've been sent out to all of the schools. I've got I've turned them all into PDFs and will be passing them off to Brian Olahan tomorrow for training purposes for DOSH and JOSH committee meetings. So that's what the reference was made.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Clark?
Yes, I now know what it's referencing. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to Mr. Morris, thank you, Chuck, for your always comprehensive reports. I always enjoy reading the reports because they're so detailed and really gives me a good sense of all the work that your team is doing, and that work definitely doesn't stop in the summer months. If anything, you're busier than ever. Now you got empty schools that you can get into. I had a couple of questions around ventilation. So the one thing I wanted to just speak to was the MERV 10 versus the MERV 13. So what I understand is that the ministry is recommending the MERV 13. And I'm wondering sort of whether you can give us a little bit of background and context in relation to us using the MERV 10 and whether there's any plans to move to a MERV 13 or maybe what some of the sort of mechanical or system requirements would be to do that. And then my other question was around the heat recovery units. I noticed in the report that you mentioned that we're using that, and I think it's a great solution. I'm wondering how many heat recovery units we've been able to access and how we identified the sites that got those.
I'll start with that one first because it's the shortest answer. HRVs, or heat recovery ventilation. We always put those in when we're upgrading a classroom or a portable, a childcare or a classroom portable. Just recently, I believe the number was, I think it was 21 more were added over summer into portable classrooms. So they are awesome. They do take the reheat. They do provide really good CO air exchange, so you don't have any issues with CO buildup. So you're not going to have a bunch of kids sitting there yawning. So and I don't have a total number of what we put in because they've been going in for quite a number of years, quite frankly. But just the more recent installations were roughly 21 or 23, somewhere in there. The other one,
The
13.
MERV 10 versus MERV 13.
Yes. So MERV 13, we looked at MERV 13. MERV 13 filters cost anywhere from $60 to $100 each. We've got some rooftop units that have between 10 and 16 filters on them. We've got some schools have 5 or 6 or 8 rooftop units. So that's and when we're talking to BC Air Filter here a week and a half ago, they were talking about that, and they said if you were even able to get them, place an order for them, it's going to be way over a year. There's a worldwide demand for MERV 13 filters. But the other part of that is the filter's wider. In some of our situations, practically all of them, the sheet metal work that has to be done to change the receiver from the 1-inch width for the current type of filters to 2-inch sometimes is fairly extensive just because of how it was built initially. And on top of that, if we manage to do that, and if we manage to get MERV 13 filters, we then have to look at the restricted airflow, because that will vastly restrict the airflow over even what the MERV 10 pleated give us. What happens when you have restricted airflow, you're going to shortchange everybody in the rooms, for one. You're not getting enough airflow through there, so you could end up with CO2 buildup. But the other part of that is, if you're dealing with old HVAC systems, and even some that have been upgraded in more recent times, the newer ones seem to have a lifespan of maybe 20, 25 years. Not having enough airflow pushed through that filter, you will end up overheating the heat exchanger in your heating systems. And when you do that, it'll become very hot, and the older it is, the greater risk there is of having a crack in the heat exchanger develop because of the overheating. And as soon as you do that, if we're talking about natural gas heating, and every school has natural gas practically, you're going to start dumping product of combustion into the classrooms instead of having it exhausted out through the flue. The only way to fix that is to remove the old fan unit that's on there that generates the airflow through the filters, and you have to upgrade that to something that will deal with the airflow that's required to move through those filters to satisfy the demand that you must have that crosses the heat exchanger and then is distributed into the school classrooms and other spaces. So we do that. So we looked at it. If we did it all, we would be pushing, and sorry, before I go there, then all of a sudden now you've got a larger cost to do with electricity, because now you've upgraded a number of things, and especially a fan unit and the controls around that. So when you look at the overall cost, and this is just a very rough estimate, speaking to an engineer and some of our staff and our maintenance manager, who's a plumber and HVAC person, as well as that's my background. We're looking at probably around $3 million to do that upgrade, if we can get the filters, if we can change some of the ducting and sheet metal around. Some of it's very, very tight to other units in there. So it's not just a matter of slipping out a little piece this wide of sheet metal with a slide in it, but you may have to change 5 feet of ducting just to modify it to be able to get down and allow our sheet metal people to make those changes. So that's my MERV 13.
Thank you very much. Trustee Duncan, follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chuck, for giving such detailed context. That helps. And I figured as much, that there would be some complexities here that you don't necessarily appreciate on the face of it. But I'm glad to hear that at least the ministry is looking to assess what the situation is in terms of the mechanical setup and so on in each school district. And hopefully that will lead to maybe some funding. We'll see. Stay tuned. Hey, you never know. The only other part of the report that I had a question about was around I noticed there was a few assessments done, one of which was I believe a noise assessment, an assessment of noise. I wondered if you could give us again some context on what kind of noise levels were tested and what kind of what the findings were.
Are you speaking about S.J. Willis?
It was in the report. Let me just find it on the page. I don't believe it spoke to where.
We had some noise from S.J. Willis that we had to deal with, and it was from the old heating system. There was thumping noises, and it was disrupting the classrooms.
It's on page 2, Chuck, of your report, which is on page 18 of the pack-up under occupational health and safety. It's the 3rd bullet. It says facilities noise exposure assessment.
I'm unsure. I'd have to talk to Brian what that is. That could be just the annual assessment that we do on everybody that works in our facilities, all of our staff, and I think some teachers, like in the shops, etc. That may be what that is, but I can clarify for next time if you need to.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you very much. That would be great. Any other further questions on this, either of these reports? Okay, thank you so much. We'll move on to F3, Vic High Seismic Project Update. I'm not sure, we're looking at Chuck again, or are you taking this, Mr. Morris, or
Well,
Secretary Treasurer?
Through the chair, this is going to be a joint effort.
Okay.
I'm just getting realigned here with everything that Jim has been doing. So just bear with me a minute while I find it here. It's a pretty good report. You read through it, it's going to give you quite a bit of information. What I'd like to point out is that we've obtained approval from the ministry. Class B budget and a revised COA has been received to provide full funding for S.J. Willis renovation. A Class A construction estimate has been prepared by our construction manager and has been accepted by the ministry. And as part of that, I spoke to Francois Bertrand on Friday, and he brought that up. It was on his desk, and he was going to more or less rubber stamp it and send it back out. So that is awesome. So we're looking, in really good shape. we're past, I think, right now, the point of discovering anything really large and scary. But, like that. So, Kim, if you want to step in and just help me out a little bit with the financial side there, thanks.
Sure. So as you may or may not know, Jim Souls has retired. So we're transitioning from, he's actually on taking some well-deserved vacation before his actual retirement date. So we're transitioning into this report. This is a report that the board will see monthly, and we'll advise the board and the public on the progress being made at Victoria High School. And we will start to see similar projects or similar reports like this for upcoming Cedar Hill projects, things once tendering is done. As Chuck said, we have applied for some additional risk and reserve funding, which I believe the ministry will approve. And so we're coming in with enough risk of reserve left for such things that might be scary. But as Chuck said, there aren't any at the moment. And I think Jim provides a pretty comprehensive report. And this is the report from June. We'll bring you an updated one for the fall to October. And I think the page that's interesting and something that we have to really keep an eye on is page 25 of the pack-up. And those are the identified risks and how we assess them given probability, consequence, and impact to cost and schedule. And so you can see there what types of things we're keeping an eye on. And yeah, so we just want to make sure that we're keeping the board and the public apprised of the progress at Vic High.
Thank you. And the pictures are always so interesting that accompany this report as well. So that's awesome. Trustee Painter.
Thank you. Through the chair to either Secretary Treasurer or I'm sorry,
Mr.
Chuck,
Morris.
you're brain cramped as soon as I thought of your title. I'm so sorry. Manager Facilities. I was wondering, I understand that things may not yet be finalized with the city around variances and such, but can we anticipate an updated site plan in the next little while? I'm curious how parking, for example, has shaken out and what that's leaving as far as green space and such.
We can certainly add that to the next report. I believe that is available. So we'll pop that into October's report, Rob, if that's okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I have some questions. Hi.
Just a second. Who are we talking to here? Is Angela? Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Yep, go for it. Thank you very much, Angela.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Since I've taken over the role of Chair of VC PAC, I've gotten a significant amount of correspondence from the community and concerned parents regarding this. We know it's a massively complex issue, this Vic High seismic upgrading, and then the Memorial Stadium revitalization project, which has been, I guess, essentially scrapped. The concerns from parents and students are essentially, in what way does this benefit the students of Vic High? They're losing so much actual physical space with this new stadium plan. And so we're also really looking forward to seeing an updated plan and looking at green space, because, when you go from an 8-lane track to a 2-lane walking track and significantly reduce the field area for upwards of 1,400 students in 2030, that's significant. And so where our concerns lie is this even fair and ethical to do so to the students and to the community? There is nobody saying that they don't need housing in Victoria. Everybody knows that we do, and Fernwood has long been the working class neighborhood. But we're concerned about how this is going to affect not just the neighborhood but the students of Vic High. So I guess there isn't really a question, but more of the public is wanting to be consulted an awful lot more than they have been, because it is a land use issue. And we're concerned that the students of Vic High are actually getting a shortfall due to a mismanaged budget. So I think that speaking for, the caregivers of 20,000 students in SD61, we're concerned that the students of Vic High are losing out. And I just really wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Thank you for your comments. We will probably, in our next reporting with the site plan, be able to maybe speak to that a little bit more, because then we will have the up-to-date site plan in front of us after the City of Victoria rezoning. But thank you for your comments. We always look forward to hearing them, and welcome as the new VCPAC chair. Any other questions about the Vic High report in front of us? No, I don't. I'm just changing screens here. Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to Cedar Hill Middle School Replacement Project. Secretary Treasurer.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to find it. Yeah, so I just wanted to update the board and give the public a bit of an update on Cedar Hill Middle School. As we know, the replacement project was approved in spring 2021. It's a $46.5 million project, of which $3.5 million has been committed by the board to bridge the cost of a new school as opposed to upgrading the old school. We'll be building the school for 575 students, and it's estimated to open in January 2025 with construction starting next September. The new school will have a neighborhood learning center, and a preliminary conceptual site plan is attached. This is by no means a final drawing, and so we just want to, it's conceptual. We've already had some calls from neighbors and things like that, but consultation hasn't yet begun. I think there are a couple of considerations the board may want to take into account when it's thinking about Cedar Hill Middle School and some of the decisions coming up that could be made. In addition to the $3.5 million commitment to bridge to the new build, the board also has a climate emergency motion, and the ministry's current capital funding only builds to net zero ready. And if we hearken back to some of the comments from the public during the Vic High construction as we went through last year, was why wasn't the school designed and built as net zero? And so the board may want to consider that as we move forward with Cedar Hill. And we estimate very roughly, with no detailed costing, that this may be $2.5 million to build the new school to a net zero now standard rather than net zero ready. With the commitment of 3.5 and a possible addition of 2.5, the board may be committing $6 million to this project and might consider property disposal if it intends to indeed contribute $6 million to the project. So no decisions have been made there, but it may want to consider that. We have consultation plans are underway with principal and the communications manager, and we've secured our architect. So the consultation plans for the design of the school, the neighborhood learning center, and any property proposal, should we be considering that, is underway. The school staff consultation will be led by the principal, and the parents and community consultation will be led by district staff. And we will be putting out some consultation information around the design of the school and the neighborhood learning center later this fall. We hope to bring a consultation plan to the board on Monday, September 27th, and there is no recommendation with this memo. It's simply for information.
Thank you very much. Trustee Painter, I saw your hand.
Thank you very much, Chair. One question I would have that would help to inform my thinking about this is if we could get some sort of an explanation on the timeline for basically recouping the costs of going to full net zero over the lifetime of the building. For example, if it was in 10 years, we will have saved through electrical and other costs by going to net zero, that the 2.6 or whatever $1 million is effectively a wash, then that would feel like a pretty good deal, just considering the financials and not looking at the environmental necessity of going to net zero. If there's some ability to sort of describe what the changes to net would be to achieve net zero, and then what the costs would be related to that, so that we can have a better understanding of what we're getting ourselves into by going down this road, I think that would be a helpful addition. Thank you very much.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And through the Chair to the Secretary Treasurer, I'm wondering if in arriving at the 2.5 million projected budget to go from what the ministry funds, which I've heard referred to as both net zero ready, and I've also heard what the ministry will fund referred to as low carbon design. So I'm not sure. I think I want to make sure we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and clear on our terminology. But from what I can gather, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the low carbon design is in essence another way of referring to net zero ready. Mm-hmm. So assuming that, you know, I also was thinking along the same lines as Trustee Rob Painter, it would be wonderful to get a sense of how that $2.5 million breaks down and what the return on investment is to taking that next step. And, you know, it would be great to have that to sort of look at and go, okay, are there opportunities to prioritize items, for instance? If we know what that bridge is going to look like and what some of the line items would be that fall within that $2.5 million budget, it would allow us to set some priorities and really look at the return on investment, both from a climate perspective, but also just a pure investment perspective for the board. And I'm really looking forward to this work. It's exciting work. I think it's going to help lay the groundwork for future projects. So I think it's worth us spending the time to really think this through. And I thank you and the team for being proactive and and suggesting right from the get-go that, you know, it would cost us about $2.5 million. So keep that in the back of your mind. And we have. And so, yeah, if it's possible to break that number down, I think that it would allow us to take that next step. And the only other thing I really wanted to suggest, and I've said this before, but I do hope that we do look at other alternatives besides land disposal. I am hoping that we look at low interest bank loans that might be available to public sector organizations undertaking these kinds of projects, any kind of grants or other federal or provincial funding that might be available for these kinds of capital projects. Again, I think it's an opportunity for us to really lay the groundwork for future projects. So if there's anything that we can do as a board to assist you, I know great grant writers. I'm sure they would be happy to volunteer their time. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the board sent a letter, and I can't remember if we sent it to the ministry or for a BCSTA motion to ask the government to fund net zero. Maybe somebody can remind me of who we trust, Secretary Treasurer, who did we send the letter to?
I think it was a motion that was taken forward to BCSTA annual general meeting.
To encourage them to advocate with us on behalf of trustees everywhere to have the government fund net zero. We've not heard anything back yet, so we're still plodding away on that. But thank you very much for those suggestions. And any other questions on this report? Okay, seeing none, we're moving to, there's no public disclosure of any in-camera items. We're moving to new business. The first item under new business is a motion that I had on the agenda in the spring.
Chair.
Yes.
My apologies for interrupting. May I ask a procedural question before you continue?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask if I would like to speak towards this motion one way or the other, do I have to do that before the motion is put forward, or can I do that after you've put the motion forward?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I'm going to withdraw the motion for this next agenda. So you probably don't have to speak to it now. And I'll just give you my reason for withdrawing the motion. In light of the meeting that the board had last Thursday night on budget process, where we'd like to go with the budget committee versus working group, I don't think we've as I said before, because a third of the board wasn't there, we didn't come to a definitive conclusion on how to proceed. But I think that in light of where the conversation was going, I'm going to withdraw this motion off tonight's agenda. And I'm sure it will come up during whatever process the board undertakes. So at this point in time, it is withdrawn from tonight's meeting. So I hope that helps you. Did you still wish to speak on it at all?
No, if it's being withdrawn, that's totally fine.
Yep.
If you wouldn't mind though, could you answer the question as a general idea when it comes to a motion? Do I have to speak before, or can I wait until the motion's put forward before speaking?
Usually people will speak before we go into debate. So once the motion is on the floor, we would ask for partner groups if they wish to speak. Okay.
Thank you very much.
But it's not on the floor now, so thank you. And welcome to the meeting. We're moving to Trustee Hensa's motion on the floor. Trustee Hensa.
Thank you very much. So my motion is that, I'll just read it out and then I'll motivate that the Board of Education temporarily vary Board Bylaw 9130.1, the Education Policy and Directions Committee, and 9130.2, the Operations Policy and Planning Committee membership from 4 trustees to 9 trustees for the remainder of the board's term, which will end roughly a year from now. And this is motivated by the consultants. When we had Mike McKay and Teresa Reznzoff were working with us in the spring, kind of just before all the budget stuff was going on, about how we can increase our effectiveness in committees and in the board meeting in general, and just increase our productivity and our general well-being as a board, I guess. And one of their top recommendations was for us all to move to a committee of the whole for our standing committees, which is Ed Policy and Ops. And their recommendation was for us to all work together on these committees and try it out for a year before doing any permanent changes to the bylaws, and just see how it goes. And then hopefully that will make our board meetings more streamlined. So I would like to give that a try, and I hope that I get everybody's support to bring this to the board next week.
Thank you. Are there any partner groups who wish to speak to this before the trustees go down this this line of inquiry? Kelvin, do I see your hand up? You're on mute.
Apologies for that. I was just going to point out that I think Angela Carmichael has their hand up, but I don't know if you have seen them.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I think I see a hand from Angela Carmichael. That's all I'd like to say.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. But that was your, thank you. So Angela?
Hi, we just, VCPAC does support Trustee Hensa's motion.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, open it up for trustees now. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a bit of two minds with this motion. So I suppose maybe I'm seeking some clarity before I decide sort of what I think. My understanding of committee of the whole is that it allows an assembly to move into discussions around a particular item of business that are more open and free flowing. And so, for instance, in the context of a standing committee, it would allow all the trustees as well as all of our stakeholders and partners to exchange a more open dialogue and dispense of some of the formality and the rules of, say, limiting how long you can speak to it, for instance. So I think that's all very positive, and at times have suggested that we move into a committee of the whole when we're discussing an item where I think it would be useful to progressing that dialogue. I suppose I'm wondering, in the context of the proposed motion, how it would affect the running of our meetings. So at the moment, any trustee can participate in either standing committee. The chair, or indeed any trustee present at a standing committee, could move a motion at any time to move us into a committee of the whole, to have that more open, free-flowing dialogue. So the only really impact I see that the proposed motion would have is to, if I'm correct in the way that I'm reading it, it would dispense of the voting rights on the committees. So we wouldn't have, 4 trustees assigned to each committee with voting rights. Am I understanding your intention through the chair to Trustee Hensa?
Trustee Hensa?
Yeah, that's part of it. Part of it's also, I guess, to encourage all trustees to attend both meetings, not just, yes, any of us can attend either and participate in dialogue or move motions, but we still, most of us don't attend both regularly. And as a result, we miss presentations, we miss speakers, presentations from the public, from staff, and it leads to a lot of confusion at the board table, I find, when some people were at an ed policy meeting or at an ops. So just for us all to be on the same page all the time, that would be, I don't know, I just feel like that would be helpful for us moving forward for this next year. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit.
That's okay. Trustee Waters?
The motion essentially means that we'd run our standing committees as committee of the whole. So all trustees would be voting members at the standing committee, essentially, just to answer that question. And I do want to speak in support of this motion. I think that we need to try to shift things because what we're doing is not super effective. And so perhaps having everybody there at the table to have the more informal discussion will help us be able to move through business, because what's happening right now is board meetings where we need to make the decisions. We end up going over the same ground of 2 previous meetings, only in one meeting. And as anybody who's witnessed our meetings will see, we're often making very important decisions, at 10, 11 o'clock. So that's not effective. And I think the more that we can work together as a team, although I know some trustees really hate that word, but the more that we can work together collaboratively, I think that's going to be better serve our communities. It also allows our community members who are attending and our partners and our rights holders who are attending the standing committee meetings to, when they're participating there, to be heard by all the trustees at once. And not feel, because right now I think there's also a panic among some of the community members feeling like they need to present at a standing committee and then again at the board meeting. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily helpful, especially as we're trying to build trust within community and build community as a learning community. I think it makes a whole lot of sense to run our committee meetings as committee of the whole, and hopefully to be a more functional and effective board.
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Trustee Hensa and Trustee Waters for both clarifying the intention behind the motion. I suppose that, I'm not going to support the motion tonight, and I'm not going to support it because I don't think it's an effective way to be managing our standing committees, to have essentially 2 more board meetings. I wholeheartedly support the idea that we should be moving into committees of the whole more often in our standing committees. I think that that would be of great benefit and allow us to have the kind of open dialogue that we should be having in a standing committee, where we're having those more detailed and deliberative discussions. And we should be including our stakeholders more openly in those discussions at the standing committee level. I personally think we can do that without varying our bylaw. I would encourage trustees to attend both meetings if they think that that is going to help them to be familiar enough with the material that does come forward to the board. But in terms of addressing any kind of communication or information flow issues between the standing committees and the board, what I would say is that I think a more effective way of dealing with that would be to ensure that the board pack-up includes the relevant materials that may well have been presented at the standing committee, but support whatever recommendation is coming forward to the board. A board member shouldn't have to necessarily attend both standing committees in order to understand what's going on, but certainly the pack-ups and the materials for the board meeting do need to be complete. And I know that both Mike and Teresa spoke to that and the concerns about just making sure there's not a disconnect between the pack-ups from the standing committee and then what ends up in the board pack-up. So I think there's a lot of good ideas out there for how we can address that continuity between standing committee and board. I certainly do not see board meetings running late as an issue. I think we're very fortunate as a board to be able to dispense of pretty much all of our business within one monthly meeting. And I think, what we've done as a board is we've reduced the timing of that meeting we've by half an hour. And I know it's not always ideal to be making decisions late, but that is, we certainly are able, and it's in our bylaws that we are allowed to convene a second meeting within a week of the board meeting if we can't properly dispense of all the business in a timely fashion without being too exhausted and making rash decisions. So there's mechanisms built into our current processes to deal with some of the concerns. But I don't want to see 3 board meetings under the guise of a standing committee. I think, what we could do, and maybe I'll suggest an amendment once I hear from my other colleagues, but what we could do is, assume that at the standing committee level, we will move into a committee of the whole once the committee meeting gets started in order to allow for that dialogue. But I certainly don't think that it would be a positive move to have every board meeting or every standing committee meeting having every board member voting, because what we'll do is we'll entrench, what we see at the board meetings a lot, which is that 4-5 split. And I don't think that that's necessarily a healthy thing that we want to entrench at a standing committee meeting. It's kind of like this, I see the board as a sober second look at some of the exchange of ideas and the recommendations at the standing committee level. In any case, I thank Trustee Hensa for being creative and bringing forward a potential idea. I love the first part of it. I just don't like the idea that we would have every board member voting and in essence turn a standing committee into a board meeting. Thank you.
Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have similar opinions, and perhaps it's part of this is terminology that I might need some clarification on. For me, committee of the whole points to relaxing the rules of debate, if we will, to enable everyone to participate, including members of the community, for example. What it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't alter the voting structure. It's simply, it's there for a period of time to allow for a broad-reaching conversation, but that the voting structure remains the same. So I do understand that this is speaking to moving from 4 to 9 trustees for all committees. So that's slightly different from committee of the whole. So I think we've got a couple of different thoughts here, but I believe I understand the premise. I do my best to attend as many meetings as possible. That's for me, that's the way that I try to stay abreast of all of the different issues that are coming forward. What I would question though is that in any meeting where we have a quorum, so where we have a majority of trustees, it seems more like that would take the place of a board meeting, and that a decision that is made where quorum exists is essentially a decision of the board. And then to move such a decision forward to a second board meeting, I'm not just sure if from a procedural process, if that makes a lot of sense, is essentially then the board is reconsidering what the board has already decided. I do think though that in some respects there are things that could be done to make committee meetings more effective. One of the concerns I have at times is that we try to move fairly substantial issues forward to the board after a single committee meeting. We've certainly seen in some cases there is a lot of discussion to be undertaken on issues. That doesn't mean that the discussion is wrong or excessive. It means that people are thinking a lot about the topic. And I'm not sure if that's what is considered combative or not, but I think that if we're concerned about the interactions between board members, that really doesn't have to do with the structure of our committees or board. It has more to do with how we behave. And I do thank Trustee Hensa for working constructively and creatively to come up with some solutions, because I recognize that we do need to improve the functionality of both committees and board, just in general terms. And I think there shouldn't be any proposal that we don't put on the table or don't consider more fully. But in this case, I'm not prepared to support this at this point in time. It just feels to me that there are other things that we can do. For example, structuring or looking at moving into a committee of the whole at the committee level so that we can have an open dialogue about the matters, with the exception that it's still the committee members who do the voting, but everyone is fully engaged and we all have an opportunity to understand the issues before they go to the board. I think that might be a worthwhile approach. But at this point in time, I'm not prepared to vote in favor of this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Waters, can I speak and then I'll let you speak? Thank you. I am in favor of this motion. I see what's happening around our different committees as not being very productive from an overall board point of view, administrative point of view. As chair of ops, I've been chair of ops many times, and it's not unusual for the ops committee to bring forward 5, 6, 7 motions to a board meeting. And because trustees don't attend ops on a regular basis, a few do that are not on the committee, we end up pulling out and teasing out most of the 9 motions, or 6 motions or 5 motions, because the people that weren't at ops have to ask all the questions that were asked at ops over again. And it makes for a very long, laborious meeting. And so I am in favor of everyone having all of the information, having all of the discussion together, and then reaffirming it at a board meeting, which hopefully the discussion for the larger part has already taken place at the ed policy or ops meeting. And so we're just reaffirming the decision that was made at that committee through however long it takes to come to that agreement or consensus at the meeting. So we spent a lot of time at the board meeting retelling whatever happened at the committee meetings to the board members who were not in attendance of that committee meeting. And I just think it's an awful big waste of time to have had that discussion over again, try and reiterate, as well as the package coming forward. People still don't seem to think that the package would be enough. They want to know the discussion. And then somebody has to say why they moved this forward and why they moved that forward and the amendments that might have happened or didn't happen. And I just feel that having everybody at the table for the whole discussion from the very beginning would benefit the board, moving all of those items forward in a relaxed, I mean, not unlike a committee level, in a relaxed view. I've got Trustee Waters, then Trustee Painter again.
Thanks. I really appreciate the discussion. I just wanted to sort of re-emphasize that we as a board sought expert advice from folks with many decades of experience, and this is a recommendation that came forward from them. And so I think it just, to me, I wish that there was more openness to trying different things. You know, I know we can go late and I can go late. I'm a night owl, but I also know that there's a lot of parents who want to be engaged and they simply can't. And I don't think it's fair. And yes, we could go to extra meetings, but again, I think we lose our community when we do that. You know, being part of being, you know, open and transparent also requires us to be effective. But I think trialing something different, like, why can't we just be open to that? You know, a board, each individual comes to the board and we vote our conscience as it is. And, you know, I worry too about creating wedges and talking about, you know, some 5-4 split. I mean, I've been on this board for 7 years and I've seen votes fall every possible different way. And yes, often you do end up seeing patterns in some ways, but I hope everybody's coming to every vote with an open mind and an open heart. You know, to me, that's what's really important, and that we're all there to listen to our partners. And so we've had issues, you know, as a board that have been named and investigated and looked at very carefully by experts. And so here we have a very simple recommendation coming forward. So I just want to urge my colleagues to just, you know, let's consider trying something different. You know, what's there to lose? I also wanted to ask the Secretary Treasurer through the chair if she can provide any clarity around this committee of the whole business, because I'm a little confused when I'm hearing trustees saying we can still move into committee of the whole as a committee, because I feel like our committees are already run as committees of a whole. And the whole is the board, not the committee. So I could be off, but I know having more experience with how different boards run things and Robert's rules, maybe Secretary Treasurer Morris can clarify.
Sure. Sorry. Through the chair. Yes, so committee of the whole can have a few different meanings to different people, depending on their past experience. So for me, committee of the whole means that all trustees show up to the meeting or to the committee meeting, and they all have voting rights. Sometimes in a board meeting, we move into committee of the whole because a board meeting is very formal, and we move into committee of the whole. For example, you will call the budget discussions, where we can have more of a committee level informal discussion with stakeholders speaking a little more or less. And we do that in a board meeting sometimes when we think there's more discussion to be had. We also learned from Trustee McNally in June that committee of the whole doesn't necessarily mean what we think it does, and that it may actually include passing the gavel from the chair or changing the chair. And so she, during the budget considerations, called it informal consideration, where you could retain the chair. So I think what Trustee Hens is proposing here is that all 9 trustees show up at committee and participate and vote at committee. And I think when we talk to Trustee Duncan, the experience there may be moving into committee of the whole during a regular board meeting to make it less formal. But our committees are supposed to be less formal, in which we can discuss. So those would be my differentiations.
Thank you. I had Trustee Painter and then Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. And if I might, just to clarify the circumstances right now, in this committee, for example, our educational partners can participate in the ongoing dialogue where they are obliged to make their positions or interests known prior to debate is at the board level. That's my understanding of our practice of, is that correct?
Currently, yes.
Thanks. Okay, just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page there. I do take your point about people wanting to relive the discussions that occurred at previous committee meetings, et cetera. It would be helpful for the purposes of discussion to have concrete examples of that. I do find that helps me to really consider what it is that we're discussing. Discussing it in more general terms makes it difficult for me to pin down. I do know that there were some cases where presentations came forward from subcommittees or ad hoc committees that did generate questions because that information wasn't readily available. But it would be helpful for me, just for the purposes of the conversation, to make sure that we are all talking about the same thing. If we had some concrete discussions or concrete examples of where there were problems, so that we can really get to the heart of what was problematic about that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, well, first of all, I guess say thank you to the Secretary Treasurer for pointing out that, yes, indeed, there are different ways that we understand committees of committee of the whole. I do see it as when we have moved into a more free-flowing conversation where we're not limiting our stakeholders' ability to interact, and all board members don't need to adhere to any kind of timelines or schedules. My understanding of Mike and Teresa's advice was that it was, you know, what they believe what they said was they recommended that we consider moving to committee of the whole for all committees until the end of our term, amongst other recommendations, which we decided to table. So, you know, I suppose because that's all they said, my understanding of the recommendation is obviously different than some of my colleagues. It was just sort of one bullet point. So, I would say that I think it's great to try something new. And I think it's really positive to move into a committee of the whole whenever we can, so that we can have full and open dialogue with everyone around the table, not just the members of the board. But I think, removing or linking that through to voting rights, I don't see that as a positive step forward, having basically 2 extra board meetings. I don't think procedurally that is going to be terribly, terribly helpful. But if this motion read, move into committee of the whole for both of our standing committees as a matter of course, then I would say thumbs up. Definitely, I support it.
Trustee Hansel to close.
Thanks. I feel like I'm not doing this motion justice because I don't excel in the lingo that my colleagues do, as far as just the policies, the procedures, the terminology is not my strong suit. And I feel disappointed because I feel that my term so far hasn't gone as I had hoped. And I was hoping that by trying something new, that maybe we could improve the last year. One of my colleagues said, we don't need to do this. We just, or I'm paraphrasing, all we need to do is change our behavior. Yeah, great. But we're 3 years in and that hasn't happened. It's just been getting worse. And so I was really looking forward to trying some of the recommendations from Mike and Teresa. I've got more cooking in the back of my brain that I'd like to bring forward. And I was hoping this was going to be a good start. And I hope someone changes their mind. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that forward, and keep those things cooking on your brain there and bringing them forward. We're going to vote on this now. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? And the motion is defeated due to a tie. In case you didn't get that, it's Leonard and Hansa for, and Duncan and Painter against. Okay. Okay, we're moving on to the last motion of the evening. Trustee Waters, could you introduce it, please?
Absolutely. I think we've already discussed this a little bit tonight, but as a board, we've made some pretty strong commitments around climate action. And I think this new project is a real opportunity for us to put our money where our mouth is, per se, and to really take action. Of course, in order to create a net zero school, it's going to cost extra. And so there's always a trade-off there. And so what I'm asking here is that the board direct our staff to come back with information for us around what that will cost so that we can consider, I hope, committing to doing that. We heard clearly from our community around Vic High, strong desire and disappointment that we did not deliver a net zero Vic High. So here, this is our next project. I think our community expects us to do this. And yes, it may require sacrifices, which is why we need to go in eyes wide open and make that decision together. So I strongly support a net zero Cedar Hill. I think we can do it. I think it could be something we can be proud of as a community and can really set the standard going forward for our district. So we were not making any decisions tonight. This is a motion to ask for a report to come back and provide us with that key information so that we can debate and decide on whether that's actually something we as a board are willing to do. It's going to take courage and commitment, and personally, I can't wait.
Sorry.
I'm not a voting member, but I assume I can move the motion.
Yes, you can. And might I suggest that you make an amendment to your motion based on the conversation that we did here? So that staff report the cost and return on investment back to the board by November. Is that something that you would consider adding to your motion just because of what we heard earlier?
I don't know if that's possible or not. For me, the return on investment is giving our community something to believe in and a future for our children. To me, that is personally return on investment. I'm not so much worried about the money side of things, but certainly if it's possible to bring that, I have no doubt that our staff will, because it does make a difference in the long-term financial picture.
Perfect. I just heard it through the conversation, so thought I'd throw that in. Okay, I'll go to our partner groups first before we get into board debate. So are there any partner groups that wish to speak? And then I'll go to Trustee Duncan.
Clarification, Chair.
Yes.
Apologize. I thought the answer to my earlier question was that within the committee structure that it's not obligatory for the our partners to discuss or present their issues now at a committee level. Certainly at the board level, they have to present their perspectives before debate starts. But at the committee level, it was my understanding that they may participate in the discussion as it proceeds.
Well, I'll stand corrected. Secretary Treasurer, am I out of order here? In
I'm
adherence
just
to our
checking.
bylaws?
I'm just checking.
We've had so many iterations of this that I will stand corrected if that's the case. You're right, Trustee Pager, that it is a board level that happens for sure, but
Honestly, Chair, I'm in the same boat with you. A little clarification every once in a while is a
I know.
helpful thing.
I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll just wait for that clarification. And then I have, for trustees, I have Trustee Duncan and Painter on my list here.
Okay, I'm not finding it in standing committees. It might be in general meetings. If any other trustees know, that would be helpful.
Anyone can speak at any time during our standing committees.
Thank you.
I can't quote it, but that's
Okay.
that's always been the way. It's the difference between the committee and the board.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So we'll go to Trustee Duncan first, then Trustee Painter.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Chair, first. I wondered, my understanding was that this was like what's being called for in a motion is actually coming already from staff. And I'm wondering whether, whether we need to engage in debate or discuss the motion, or whether in fact staff is already intending to bring what is being called for in the motion, plus some other supporting, whether it's return on investment or other analysis, projections and so on of energy use, that kind of thing. So can we just get security?
Yeah, I think from my understanding, staff has never been directed to find out this information. Maybe the Secretary Treasurer can confirm or correct me if I'm wrong.
In the Cedar Hill Middle School report, we did say we could crunch some numbers on recovery over the number of years and a breakdown of the 2.5. I personally would prefer the recommendation because I do believe the actual detailed estimate is going to take some time.
Thank you. Okay, so with that clarification, then, yeah, I do support the motion. I think that anything we can do to clarify from the outset and plan and kind of all be on the same page in terms of, what it is we're trying to achieve, the better. And, puts us on the right path for starting to implement what we've been talking about for years in terms of climate action and a strategy moving forward as a board and what that looks like from an implementation point of view. I would hope, and I don't know if it needs to go in as an amendment, but I would hope that what comes forward in terms of a report for the board does include some kind of analysis of energy use. So some comparisons between, if we were to make the additional investments to make it net zero now, rather than net zero ready, what the different energy use is projected to be. Because I think it's important for a board from a fiduciary point of view to really understand the impact of from a financial perspective of making the changes, as well, obviously from the perspective of our obligations as a public body to start to move things forward and reduce our GHG. So I do support the motion with the caveat that do we need to make an amendment to the motion in order to make it clear that we also are hoping to have some additional assessments in the report? And I guess that's through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer.
Secretary Treasurer, would you be expecting to include that in a report on the costing?
I think Trustee Waters spoke to adding that to the motion, and I'm not sure she agreed. So I don't know. I think it's Trustee Waters' motion.
Okay, well, should I move an amendment maybe then? I don't know if anybody objects, but I could move an amendment if the committee will just indulge me for a moment just to find the motion so I can suggest some wording.
So after the word cost, I had plus and return on investment was how I heard the conversation earlier. Or did you want something more substantial than that?
So to determine, it says currently to determine the cost of incorporating net zero into the design. I'm wondering if we can, to determine the cost of incorporating net zero into the design.
And further, that staff
Yeah.
report the cost and return on investment back to the board.
Yeah, I mean, return on investment. I mean, I think this is the thing, and I would appreciate a steer from the Secretary Treasurer. I mean, return on investment in this context for me means that we're looking at energy use and we're comparing energy use over a period of time, given both possibilities. So energy use in a net zero ready building and the projected energy use in a net zero now building, and then looking at the return on investment with each option. So there's usually some energy use projections, and I don't know if our energy manager could help us with that, but that's kind of what I had in mind. So is that enough to get that if we were to do what Trustee Leonard is suggesting in terms of an amendment? Is that what we would get back?
Any suggested wording would be fine from anybody that would encompass what Trustee Duncan's looking for.
Maybe I'd just say return on investment based on assessments of potential energy use for both a net zero ready building, Cedar Hill Middle School building, and a net zero now. Does that make it more clear?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
less clear? I don't know.
Makes it more wordy.
It does.
Secretary Treasurer, do you have any suggestions so that it's clear as mud for you and staff as to what we would like?
I think what you're really looking for is that staff report the cost, including business case, back to the board by November 2021.
Excellent.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kim. I knew you'd have a solution. Thank you.
Okay, so that's an amendment. Okay, any other, where was I? Any other speakers? I think I had Trustee Painter.
Chair, I just noticed that our student rep had his hand up. I'd be happy to let him go forward. We always need to hear from our students.
Yeah, I just think.
Are you telling me about Angela?
Yeah, once again, I think she's had her hand up for some time.
Thank you. Okay, Angela.
Thank you. I just want to be, thank you, Chair. I want to be clear. Are your partners allowed to speak, able to speak on this motion? Because it wasn't clear to me. Okay.
Yes.
So when SD61 declared a climate emergency, I was there and it was a very big deal. If we're going to use words like climate emergency and then go so far as to declare one, we need to start looking at what that means, because it certainly isn't packing in and packing out of lunch and recycling. That's going to do nothing. That's going to do absolutely nothing. So we support this. Let's do the research. Let's find out if we can, if we have to build a new school, let's do it to the best of our ability to make it green. So I want to thank Trustee Waters for bringing this to the board, because we think it's important. And I like what she says about, it's time to put our money where our mouth is. We're talking about how important it is that we lower our carbon footprint to leave something behind for our children. And this is the way to do it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. So two-part question. The first one would be, is a November turnaround, is that a satisfactory time period for staff to do this work? Just seeking clarification that that's a reasonable time frame.
Secretary Treasurer.
We could do our best, and we thank the board for always being flexible when we are not able to meet a specific deadline. We know that we've engaged our architect and that design will occur this fall, winter, so we'll try. And if we need an extension, we'll ask for it. But we know design is imminent, and so it's time to put pencil to paper to figure it out.
That's perfect. That's just what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much. The other part is my thought on return on investment is not to suggest that somehow money and budgets are more important than our environment and our future, quite frankly, and the future of our children, which is most critical. It's that we work as effectively as possible in addressing this. So really what I'm interested in hearing, whether as part of this discussion or down the road, is to learn from our staff as to where we can best make investments to have the most beneficial effect. I love this project, and I have been in favor of going full net zero right from the get-go, so no resistance there. What I do want to know is that our professional staff feel confident that that is the most effective way for us to use our very scarce resources to move forward on reducing our carbon footprint. And as long as we get some sort of sense that that's what I'm concerned about in terms of return on investment. 2.5 million is not insignificant in terms of our the possible projects that we can move forward with. Would it be more effective to put in more efficient boilers everywhere else and recognize that in a few years government policy is going to change to fund us for the net zero? I don't know what the options are, but I would very much like to hear from our staff on how they feel we can best approach it. If this is the way, then I'm 100% behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelvin.
Just another note on that return on investment and better use of our funds. It is still very important, I think, for us to move forward with the net zero school, because I know definitely the sentiment among the students, just look at the climate strikes that happened every Friday last year. There's a very heavy weight on the importance of climate. And if we don't go forward with this and say, oh, the ministry can provide us with more funds later for projects like this. I mean, we can't just go back and demolish the school and then rebuild at net zero, even if we use the funds for like other environmental projects, like the more efficient boilers. So that's I guess that was my piece. Just even if there are other uses for the funds, we can't move forward with this and expect to redo it later.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to put my, well, just a minute. We're still speaking to the amendment. So Trustee Duncan, are you speaking to the amendment? Because that was including the business case.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know if I close on an amendment. It's getting too late for me to think so deeply about this, but I just wanted to say, picking up on Calvin's point, you know, I really agree. I think that, you know, he's speaking to the lost opportunity costs down the road of not taking the opportunity we have now when we're engaging in building a new school to really build in, you know, the design elements that are going to future-proof us. And so I'm hoping that, you know, by amending the motion, we're going to get, what we'll get is a true understanding of the impact of that investment, and it'll focus the board's collective minds on, you know, what implementation looks like, so that we're not just talking the talk, but we're walking the walk. And so I'm pretty confident that once we get that return on investment and detailed breakdown of what the different costing is for a net zero ready and a net zero now, that it's just going to put us in a really good position and be make us more clear of the need to support these kinds of projects moving forward. Vic High is a great example of a lost opportunity when it comes to, you know, some of the potential design that could have been included. And I think we're going to learn, and we have. I think it's clear from our discussion tonight that we have learned that we don't want to lose those opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question on the amendment, and that is to including business case as well as the cost package that's there. So all those in favor of the amendment? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Going back to the main motion now with that included, I would like to move an amendment to change the word commit in the last line to consider. The way this motion reads, it doesn't matter how much it costs, the board has to commit the funds. And being, we still have to find the money from someplace. We have to let our public know where we found the money from. We have to justify the expenditure, and I can't imagine that I wouldn't consider it, but I don't want the motion to tell me that I am considering it no matter how much it costs. Because I agree with everyone here that this is very, very important, and I would like to move forward with it as well. But the way I read this motion is, doesn't matter how much it costs, we have to move forward with it. And then we have to find the funds later and tell the public where we got them from. Whereas I would like to know what the cost is, have the Secretary Treasurer tell us where we can possibly get the funds from, and then vote for it. So I'm moving that we use the word consider instead of commit. Do I have any discussion? Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. I do recognize your concern as expressed. I'm less concerned about that simply because it will be coming forward for board approval, and that the board approval will be based upon the report that we have in hand, and that if the board at that time does pass a motion to commit the funds, then we're doing so with the knowledge of that this is something that we're moving forward with. I do understand what you're saying, however, about wanting to know that we're not simply kiting checks in terms of where the money is going to come from. But I think if we make that commitment now, it's something that will go into our financial planning moving forward, so that we will prioritize this over others.
Okay.
My perspective, that's all.
No, that's I always like to hear other perspectives. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll just call the question on my little one-word change there. All those in favor of the word? All those opposed?
I'm not opposed, Chair.
You're not opposed, you're abstaining?
I'll abstain. I wasn't fast enough to jump on the bandwagon, so I guess I'll abstain.
Okay, and Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, I'm in favor. I'm fine with that word change. I mean, I think I agree with Trustee Painter. It's so yes, I'm in favor
of changing the word. Okay, and that amendment carries. So the reading of the new motion is, and further that the board report the cost, including a business case, back to the board by November 20th, 21 for board approval to consider the funds to the net zero design. That's where we're at now. Did you get that, Secretary Treasurer? Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? Trustee Waters to close.
I just wanted to mention Trustee Ryan Painter, with whom I developed this motion. We have spent quite a bit of time dreaming about this and talking about it. So I just would be remiss to mention and thank him for his efforts around this. And thank you to the committee for hopefully voting in favor of taking the first step towards a net zero at Cedar Hill.
Awesome. Thank you. All those in favor of the amended motion? 2, 3, and that's unanimous. Awesome. Thank you so much. We have no further notice of motion. We have no general announcements. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
We have a notice of motion.
I do?
Hope we have a notice of motion.
Oh, okay. What,
I just want to let the committee know that at least I'm planning to bring the standing committee motion to the board so we can talk about it again on the 27th.
okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Any other notices of motion or general announcements? Trustee Painter?
CBC tells us we're looking for another minority liberal government. Thank you.
Oh, just what I wanted to hear. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, motion to adjourn. Okay, Trustee Duncan, all those in favor? Thank you very much. Have a